Welcome to the candidate information session for the 24 territory election. I begin today by acknowledging the Larrakia people, traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today and those attending online. So this session is aimed to provide information about the roles and responsibilities of candidates. I hope that you find this information session useful, and this is being streamed online. Just a bit of housekeeping. Bathrooms are just straight ahead. And candidate packs are out front. Those people attending online, we will email those to you. And we do ask that you hold your questions to the end of the presentation. The NTEC staff members here will hang back and answer any questions that you have. And for people attending online, we ask that you email your questions to our email address, ntec@nt.gov.au, or call us. And we're always happy to arrange a one-on-one meeting with any candidates that would like more information. So our presenters today is myself, Jordan Burgess. I'm the Public Awareness Manager for NTEC. Kirsten Kelly, the Anti-Electoral Commissioner. Sue White, Senior Project Officer. And Chris Brack, Financial Disclosure and Compliance Manager. So I'm hoping by now you've all seen some advertising regarding the election out at market. We have TV, radio, social media, digital out at the moment, and we'll be continuing to increase that towards the election. We have stakeholder engagement resources available on our website. These include remote engagement, cultural and linguistically diverse communities, disabled and elderly and youth people. You can download those packs and access them and share them throughout the community. We also have videos in languages and multilingual guide, which is in 11 international languages. So if to stay up to date about the election, we recommend that you subscribe to our Facebook page, check our website regularly for more information, and subscribe to our mailing list. We send fortnightly newsletters and media releases from that mailing list. The link to that mailing list is on our website, but if you need any information about that, let us know. So I'll pass to Kirsten Kelly, the Anti-Electoral Commissioner.
Thank you, Jordan, and thank you everyone for attending in person and those streaming online. It's certainly a very exciting part of the electoral process when we have the opportunity to present to candidates, and we did a similar presentation in Alice Springs last week. So as most of you may know, the Northern Territory Electoral Commission is an independent agency with the responsibility for conducting elections in the Northern Territory and the impartial conduct of elections in the Northern Territory. So that includes the Legislative Assembly elections and also the local government elections and by-elections. So in the Northern Territory, we have fixed term elections. So they occur on the fourth Saturday in August, 4 years following the previous general election. So the issuing of the writ is the authority for the Anti-Electoral Commission to commence the conduct of the election, and that's currently scheduled to occur on the 1st of August. So in August this year, Territorians, and there's about 155,000 of Territorians who are currently eligible to participate in the election, will be casting their vote to elect the 25 members of the Legislative Assembly and the next Northern Territory government. So the voting period will commence from the 12th of August, with the election day being on the 24th of August. The voting system in the Northern Territory is full preferential. And what that means is that a voter, when they're casting their vote, is required to put a number against each candidate square in order of their preference or choice. So in December 2023, the Redistribution Committee released its final report on the redistribution of the Northern Territory into electoral divisions, having undertaken the actual redistribution process and the lead up with that in accordance with the Electoral Act. So this redistribution resulted in boundary changes to 18 of the 25 divisions. The revised boundary changes have been applied to the electoral roll, and that application of those changes will come into effect at the election in August. So there are maps circulating showing the revised boundary changes for each of the divisions. They're also available online, and if you have any trouble locating those, please let us know. So today's information is all about the candidates and a very critical component of any electoral process and democracy. So we certainly, again, appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with the Anti-Electoral Commission, and even up until today, reaching out with any questions that you have, because it certainly helps that process. So candidates play an important role in the process, and the purpose of today's session and the resources that we've developed is to support candidates through the nomination process, to understand their obligations in financial disclosure, to understand campaigning requirements, and to also understand the count process and their ability to appoint scrutineers. So it's really important that where you can, you're able to engage with the resources that we've provided. Please reach out and take the opportunity to meet with the team if you've got any questions. We do have an office located in Mitchell Street, Darwin at the TCG Centre where people can come and drop in. From the 29th of July, we will have an office in Alice Plaza on level 1, where you can also make your inquiries there as well. But as I said, always happy and willing to meet with people to talk about the election process. Okay. Move on from that. So this is just a slide showing the key dates for the 2024 election. So postal voting applications open, and they have been open since the 1st of January this year. Nominations open on the 1st of August. The electoral roll closes on the 2nd of August at 5 p.m. Nominations close on the 8th of August at 12 noon sharp. And voting will commence, early voting in our remote voting schedule will commence from the 12th of August. Our teams will be visiting over 171 locations across the territory in the 2-week early voting period. There'll be 16 remote mobile teams providing that service across the territory. We also will be visiting hospitals and correctional centres as well to provide voting services and providing postal voting services to aged care facilities. Election date, the 24th of August. So some of you may have seen it's online, but we have released a service plan. So the purpose of the service plan is to provide guidance to the Anti-Electoral Commission on how it will be delivering its election, but it also has a dual purpose where it provides support to electoral participants in understanding the electoral process, but also to allow you to plan for the election yourself. So the purposes, and I won't repeat this, but it's a tool used for everyone to support participation in the process. So I'd certainly encourage people to have a look at the service plan in addition to the candidate handbook as well. A new initiative for the Northern Territory, and this is following on from other electoral commissions across Australia, is there has been a rise in misinformation, disinformation. So misinformation is where incorrect information is shared without malicious intent. So it might be my mistake. Someone reads something and they say, well, gee, I should let someone else know about that. I'd hate them to go to a voting centre when they're not vaccinated. It's just not true, but it's not spread with any malicious intent. Whereas disinformation is different. Someone is intentionally spreading information to deceive. And so all electoral commissions across Australia have introduced in their elections a misinformation, disinformation register or equivalent. It started with the Australian Electoral Commission in the last federal election, introducing a check the facts and then putting online and calling out information that is incorrect. So in the Northern Territory, there's no truth in political advertising laws, but we are the Anti-Electoral Commission and we're responsible for conducting elections. So where there is incorrect information about the electoral process, we will call that out and we will record it in the register. And we certainly encourage people to review that register. If you're hearing things that you're not sure of, to report it to us, that we will look into it. And if it meets the thresholds to be put on the register, we'll certainly call that out, because it's important that people, voters, when they're hearing information during the electoral period, that if it's about a candidate or a policy position, that the material's authorised, they can go back to the source and make inquiries through the candidate or the party. But if it's about the electoral process, that it's correct. And we want people to participate in the process and we want them to have the correct information. So we also have a tool on our website aligned with the AEC Stop and Consider, and that's about supporting people when they are hearing information during elections to think about the source, think about where it's come from, check that it's a reliable source, check when it was circulated, the currency of it. So just some things outside of the misinformation, disinformation register to support people when they're hearing information during an election period. And that's me, came around very quickly. So I'll hand over to Susan White, our Senior Project Officer. Thanks, Sue.
Hello. It's lovely to see lots of faces today. I think I've met with most of you already at some point. Okay, so just check this technology out and make sure I press the right button. So I'm going to cover a bit more about your nomination and some scrutineers and some of the processes that you'll be going through in the next couple of weeks. So as Kirsten's mentioned, nominations open for this election on Thursday, the 1st of August. There are eligibility to be a candidate. You have to be an Australian citizen. You have to have attained to the age of 18. You need to be entitled or be qualified to become entitled to vote at an election of members for the Legislative Assembly. You've been a resident within the Commonwealth for at least 6 months and within the Territory for at least 3 months. For this election, we have 2 nomination forms. So one is to be party endorsed. This is completed normally by the registered officer, and they will have everyone that is sitting or being pre-selected for their positions will be nominated on that form. The second kind of form is what we call one that is for an independent. There's a few criteria that's a bit different. So part of this form, you must have 6 nominators. They need to be enrolled as of the close of roll. So the close of roll date for this election is the 2nd of August at 5 p.m. So they must be on that electoral roll for the division you are running in. So as part of your nomination form, we're asking for 6 nominators. On your form, there is an opportunity to actually get some additional nominators. I do recommend that you try and get a few more. A lot of people believe they are currently, enrolled correctly. Sometimes they're not. There is a process by the AEC where there is a direct enrolment. So if they've changed their address or they could possibly have been updated or come off, etc. So we just say, get a few extra. It just sort of takes away that alleviation of having a defective nomination form where we need to go back to you and say, can we get some more nominated? So I recommend you do get a few extra. All nominations must include a photograph and it must be declared that it has been taken within the last 6 months. We do ask for head and shoulders, and for that to be provided. It must have a declaration on the back of that photograph to say that it has been taken within the last 6 months. All nominations must also include a $500 deposit per candidate, which you pay at the time of lodging your nomination. Okay, nominations must be completed correctly to be accepted. We also recommend that you get your nomination in early. So don't wait till that last 10 to 12 mark off it when the nominations close. If there is something that is defective about your nomination form, if you get that form in early, it gives us that little bit of leeway to get back to you to say, right, this part of it's defective, your payment hasn't gone through, your photograph, whatever it may be. It gives us that time to liaise with you to make sure that we give you enough time to get that correct information so we're able to accept it. We are saying too that if you are lodging your form in person, try and make an appointment with us so we've got time to sit down with you and actually go through the form with you at that time of nominating. We have two options to lodge your nomination. So we have for this election got a new portal, which is on our website. You will still complete your form as you normally do, but you will actually upload your photo and your nomination form through this portal, which will then go to our nominations email address. So you can't just send your like you used to just to an email address. It is through a portal. What we are recommending that you do though is as soon as you've sent that, even though you will get a message to say that it's been submitted, please contact us to make sure that we've received it. So NTUC must receipt your nomination so we can receive it and accept it. Just make that phone call to say, I put it through the forward portal. Have you got it? And we're going to say yes. We will respond pretty much as soon as we can to say that we have received it, not accepted, just received it. So you do have that further confirmation that we do have it. When you come to the counter, again, we will receive it while you are there and it will be received. We have two offices to lodge a nomination. So there is the Darwin office, which is in Mitchell Street, but we're also going to have an office in Alice Springs. If it was, you may be running for Alice Springs or the 5 divisions in that area, but we do have an office in Alice Springs too that a nomination will be lodged, and that will be on the first floor of Alice Plaza. That office will start operation on the 29th of July. There's just some tips and details. Okay, the declaration of the nominations is a public declaration. Immediately following the declaration will be a public draw for positions of candidate names on the ballot paper. Once a location and time has been confirmed for this event, you will all be invited to attend this event, and it will also be streamed. Yep, and it will also be streamed. So once that event's happened, if you are an accepted candidate, this is where you find out where your name will be on the ballot paper, so you can then arrange to get your how to vote cards, etc. done for that. Scrutineers in an election play a really, really important part of the election process. Scrutineers represent candidates or registered political parties. Their role is to observe that the election process is carried out fairly and impartially. Scrutineers must be appointed by a candidate. A candidate cannot be a scrutineer. There is one per voting centre during voting. These can be interchangeable. So if you had 2 volunteers who were going to be your scrutineers and one wanted to do the morning of the voting centre and one wanted to do the afternoon, that is okay. Just make sure that everybody has been appointed and they bring their form with them to the voting centre manager. Count centres or the scrutiny centres, they have one per count table. So in your voting centres on election day, there will only be one count table per the division for that home division, and if any have any duals or triples or surrounding divisions that it looks like that we can undertake a count for. However, in the scrutiny centre, the main one where we're counting all the early voting ballots for that 2 weeks, the urban teams that are being returned, the first postal count that will be happening, those count tables and the list of those tables will be advised at a later date, so you'll be able to prepare for your scrutineers. On election night, though, we are asking that you arrive no later than 5:45 so you can be briefed and have an undertaking of what's going to happen in that count centre that night. And we'll also register you. Sometimes you may be representing, a scrutiny may be representing more than one candidate. So just that we have an idea of who's what parties or divisions they're going to be looking at scrutiny, we'll have to register and have a lanyard to say, right, this person's entitled to look at this division, this division, this division, etc. So just make sure that your scrutineers do arrive in time so we can get that process happening before that 6 o'clock cut-off for the counts. If you intend having a scrutineer that may be attending like a voting centre for more of a duration, and a really good example is we have our offsite office, which is called Eaton, which is the old Flip Out Centre, and that's over in Osgood, I think is the name of the street. So part of that, we are going to have an area that will be sectioned off to be an early voting centre for 2 weeks. On the Saturday, that then becomes an election day, and within the centre will also become the Saturday night and the further 2-week counts and scrutiny centres. So that's where all our further counts will occur, or our rechecks will occur, our distribution of the preferences will all take place in that bigger area of our offsite office. So for a scrutineer, there are 3 opportunities to be able to scrutiny at that centre. What we are saying is that if you have a scrutineer that wants to come and may be attending some of that 2 weeks of the early voting centre, they only have to present their form once to the voting centre manager of the early voting centre. If they then want to come on the Saturday to scrutiny the election day voting centre, they would have to provide another form because it is a separate voting centre. If then they're considering attending the scrutiny centre for the counts for the Saturday night and so on, again, we're happy for them to provide one form and just list when they're going to attend. And again, when they come to register to each of those days, we'll already have their form, we'll have their lanyard or who they're presenting. So again, we're just trying to make it a little bit easier for the registration process of what actually occurs on those Saturdays. So they won't have to bring a form every single time if it's a continuous of a count centre or a voting centre. Is that sweet? Okay. So for the role of a scrutineer, in a voting centre, as I've said, they're there to observe basically what the processes are. They're there to observe the instructions that we at NTUC are giving our electors and our staff are giving the electors to undertake how to complete their forms and that sort of stuff. Their role is to observe, so they cannot engage with conversation with electors. We may ask them to observe our opening and closing of ballot boxes to be a witness. If somebody is requiring an assisted voter and it is the voting centre manager or someone who is part of the NTEC staff is requested to help this person, a scrutineer, we will ask a scrutineer to observe what we are doing as providing instructions to that elector. So we'll ask the scrutineer to stand back. They're there to make sure that the process and what we're saying to that elector and the instructions is impartial and is clear. They're not there to watch what the elector is doing. They're not there to watch what their vote. They're just there to make sure that we are doing our job correctly. At a voting centre, you will also note that sometimes somebody may come and are unable to actually get out of the vehicle or unwell and can't actually physically come into the voting centre. What we will also do is then assist the vote by going to the vehicle and we will take our paperwork with us. We will always, in the first instance, ask a scrutineer to come with us and again, make sure we are following our protocols and our procedures. A scrutineer can scrutiny in any of the types of the voting centres we have. So we have an early voting centre, an election day, we have urban voting, we have remote voting. So there are various different kinds of voting centres. They can scrutiny the counts. Some of the things they can't do is use electronic equipment near the tables. Sometimes they may use their phone as a calculator. But what we will do, and we do allow, is that after each count has been finalised, we will let the scrutineers take a photo of the result sheet, because that's going to go straight to our results centre, which will then be published immediately. So we are happy for them to take a photo of the result sheets. Sometimes they're often there writing the figures, but we will do that as well. They can't engage in any conversation with anybody within the voting centres or make conversation. They can't leave any how to vote material in there. They can't take anything out of the centres. So they are there just to observe. Scrutiny also may leave at any time, so they don't have to stay for the duration. If they wish to leave halfway through, they are more entitled to leave whenever they like. Again, we just ask that they return their vest or their lanyard when they leave, and then we'll keep that aside in case they come back for a future one. They can't wear any of your campaigning T-shirts or emblems while within a voting centre as well. So they're not representing you as a campaign worker, they are a scrutineer. There will be a online scrutineer training, which is scheduled for the 15th of August. We highly recommend as many of your scrutineers attend. We've run a couple of these sessions now in a couple of by-elections. The feedback that we've received has been excellent. It's given them a little bit more understanding of what our role is. They see how to do a count. They see why we make decisions. When we're trying to look at the intent of the elector on calling what that vote may actually be in the numbers, it just alleviates a lot of that unknown on that particular night of like what they can and actually can't do. Okay. So we do have different types of voting. We have the early voting, which is an early voting centre, which also includes interstate voting. We do have each of the capital cities having an interstate voting centre for the same duration as well. We have postal voting, which is already open, and we're already receiving, I think we're up to about 700 applications so far. So the postal votes are really taking off. We have remote voting, which your teams travelling to remote localities. Your urban voting, which is prisons, institutions. As Kirsten mentioned, we are now not actually visiting the aged care facilities, but our postal vote manager has been doing a lot of work in the last 12 months on trying to get as many people as postal vote options. So that means that they'll automatically get a postal vote every time there's an election. We have Election Day Voting Centre, which is just on the 24th of August. How can I forget that? Absent voting is when you're just voting outside of a division. So for an early voting centre, the Commissioner has determined regions within a voting centre. That just means that more people can vote in a ballot box that day, and it means that they will be counted on that first Saturday. Absent voting happens a little bit later on once we have got all the envelopes together about all those different divisions, and then we'll do an absent count. So they don't get counted on a Saturday night. And declaration voting. So that is when somebody isn't on the NT electoral roll, they can actually complete a declaration vote, and that will then be assessed for eligibility, and then that can be accepted into the count or rejected if there is an error. If somebody has already been marked off the roll in error, they can declare that they haven't been, and we'll do all the checks and afterwards to see if they're eligible to vote. The website will have a list of all the voting centres and opening times. The website also has a new feature now where you can actually put in your address and it will tell you your nearest voting centre. So I live at this address and they will come up in the order of the closest venue to you. For this election, any elector can vote at any voting centre. It'll just whether it goes in a ballot box or an envelope. So everybody can vote at every voting centre. Okay, so the vote count process. So what we'll be doing on the night for the divisions that we're counting, we will commence with a first preference count. At the first preferences, the Commissioner will determine before 6 p.m. on election day who they feel will be the two candidate preferred for that particular division. Our voting centre managers will not know these people, the two top runners or two candidates that they've chosen. They will know that after 6 p.m. to do a two candidate preferred. This is the Saturday night counts are indicative. Everything will be rechecked on the Monday. Just remembering there's some of these staff have worked 13 hours on election day and are then undertaking up to some voting centres 4 counts. So it is indicative, but everything will be rechecked on the Monday. If there's anything in doubt on that night, it'll be also rechecked for informality and for not votes. And then in the weeks following, we'll have the fresh scrutineers, and then we'll start doing other counts as they come in. We'll do a first postal count for that first night, but then through the next 13 days, we'll be doing a postal 2 and probably a postal 3 count, just depending on how many we get in for that week or the next week. All the absent counts will be done, the early absent counts and the declaration counts. They'll go through the same process. They'll have a first countdown, and then we will recheck everything and recount everything. And on the last day, we'll do the distribution of preferences, which will follow the last postal count. So we have to wait till 12 noon on that last day to receive any last postal votes. We will do the final counts for those. We'll recheck them, do the TCP, and then we'll go into the distribution of preferences. So we'll give you an indicative time about what that time will be to commence, but we won't know until we do the final counts. And again, if you're part of the mail out list, and candidates will also be advised of all these schedules that we will have. And I am done, and I'm happy to take any questions afterwards. And anytime you want to come and have a meet or a chat, please just give me a call. Thank you. I believe so.
All right, thanks, Sue. Yep, so I'll go through campaigning, campaign material, and financial disclosure. So in terms of campaign material, it is the sort of set out definition. It's very broad, printed, online, video, TV, things that are promoting or opposing a candidate, or even just in general intended to influence voting in the election. So particularly as a candidate, you'd really view almost everything that you're going to be putting out and producing as campaign material. So what needs to happen with that is that everything needs to be authorised, which I'll go through in a moment. And then in terms of us regulating, as Kirsten mentioned earlier, we're not here to do truth in advertising. So claims about, this candidate actually believes this, whatever. That's not for us to regulate. That's for the public. What we're regulating is any sort of misinformation or disinformation about the election process. So if someone's putting up a flyer saying, if you vote for this candidate, actually they switch it around and give it to whoever, or, as mentioned with you can't vote if you're not vaccinated, all that sort of stuff, we regulate. So for authorizations, it's your name and address. I guess, big picture, why we do authorizations and why that's a rule is for two reasons. One, it's for transparency, so that people know where material's coming from, and for contactability as well. So we can contact you, if there are issues. So things need to have name and address. For the address, if it's an organization, party, we're expecting the full address. If it's as an individual, we're happy with your street address, given we can still contact you that way. And there is, obviously that little bit of privacy that provides. So you need those, the name and address of the printing company, if it's, printed corflute, those sort of things. If you're just printing flyers at home, authorized and printed by, put your own name. Anything double-sided needs it on both sides. And then source as well. And this is particularly if somebody has paid for a whole lot of advertising for you, it's putting that on there as well, just for that transparency as well. With authorization, there's a whole lot of different forms of media. So we've set out a fact sheet with a whole range of things. So TV and radio, for example, there's a particular way you've got to do that through clear ads. They have certain things they want. Social media, these days. Again, we set out rules for that in terms of you can authorize your whole page through your bio, through pinning a post at the top. And then that covers what you're producing on your page, except for things that can live on their own. So if there's, say, an image that's very clearly could live on its own, you want to authorize that as well. But a whole lot of different things, given, it's getting broader and broader. So, have a look at those. Again, if you have any questions, we're more than happy to have a little look and say, yep, that's what you've got to do there, or add or remove that. And put a couple of examples there. I think a really important thing to remember is even your advertisements that are, vote one me and you've got a big picture of you, that still needs to be authorized. So in terms of placement, as within the Electoral Act, as us as Electoral Commission, we don't set timelines. Where campaign material can be placed. So we do regulate it around voting centres, but outside of that, it's wherever the land is. So on council verges, that comes down to the local council. On private property as well, some councils have rules on that. A lot of councils have a 6-week rule, but not all. Some of it have it for things on private land, some of it have it for things on council verges. So it's really check in with your local council. Department of Infrastructure, DIPL, the rest of that, they control the big roads. So, if you're thinking Stuart Highway, that sort of stuff, if you want to put things there, again, that's their rules and they have that 6-week period. If you're, private land, again, you need the owner's approval. For shopping centres, so we have a lot of voting centres in shopping centres and just shopping centres in general. Again, it's permission. Almost all of the shopping centres have said, particularly the ones that we have voting centres in, they just don't want any campaign material. Coolangatta and Alice Plaza, it's chat to them if you do want to put it. But if you're thinking, Gateway, Casuarina, they've just said, we don't want to have any campaign material in there. Then in terms of once the voting period starts, there's a whole bunch of rules which we enforce, which I'll get to a little bit later. In terms of how to vote cards, so with how to vote cards, as we mentioned earlier on, the declaration of nominations is on the 8th of August in the afternoon. At that point, you'll know who else is on your ballot paper and the order. So that's really the time you'd be, preparing and getting your how to vote cards out. A couple of tips with those: don't make it or don't include the words ballot paper, and don't make it look like a ballot paper, just in case somebody does actually try to submit it as a vote. So give it a little bit of colour. So we don't need to approve how to vote cards, but what we look at is if it will lead to a formal vote. So if somebody takes your how to vote card and they sort of copy that, follow the instructions, and it leads to an informal vote, we will have issues and with those how to vote cards. And as well, it's not in your interests to do that because you're going to miss votes. So I guess the options that people tend to use for how to vote cards, it's either your traditional, the candidate number, these are the numbers for all the candidates, which I suggest. Some people may do what's called a split how to vote card. So they might go, vote for me if you prefer one party over the other. This is how you do it. The other side is if you prefer the other party. But also if, as an independent, you just want to say, vote one me, do the rest of the preferences yourself, or vote one me and, second this other independent and the rest yourself. You can do that, sort of set it up, put that one in, but you then need very clear instructions for people that they need to mark all the boxes themselves. So if you're just making a little pamphlet with a one in your box and nothing else, it could be quite misleading for voters. We'll have an issue with that. And again, that's not in your interests. So campaigning at voting centres, as I mentioned earlier, we have rules about both campaigning and campaign material at voting centres. So in the service plan and on our website now, we have a list of where are the voting centres and the early voting centres. So there are rules on what you can and can't do within certain distances, and campaigning is essentially trying to win people's vote, going up, having a chat to them, giving out how to vote cards, whatever else. While I'm here, I will also mention there's a broadcast blackout period. So this is from the end of Wednesday till 6 o'clock on Saturday. There are rules for radio and TV specifically that they can't show any advertising on that Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So just of note there. So with voting centres, there are different rules based on when it's an early voting centre and an election day centre. So for early voting centres, we have what's called a prohibited zone, which the default is 10 metres from the entrance, but that can be changed. So a lot of our voting centres are in shopping centres, and those shopping centres are not going to allow campaigning on the premises. So that boundary will be extended. So that's to note. And then on election day, the boundary is 100 metres. Again, can differ a little bit on the particular voting centre. But, again, shopping centres don't want campaigning in there. We will be releasing a list of the centres, which ones you can sort of campaign closer to and which one we can't in the next couple of weeks. So hopefully that helps your planning. But yeah, it's just important to note for that. And when you can't get that close to campaign, we will provide pamphlet holders, which you can then give your how to vote cards to that voting centre manager, and they'll put those how to vote cards there. Again, in that list, we'll say when and where, which divisions, which voting centres, but just acknowledging that you're not able to campaign at some places and still being able to provide those how to vote cards. So within the rules, there are things called a designated campaign area. The point of this, or why this was created, was to allow voters who want to seek out more information a way to talk to candidates. So and this is specifically on election day, because it was noted that the 100-metre boundary is quite large. I think logistically it becomes an issue at a lot of places. Either there's nowhere with shade, there's nowhere, and a whole lot of reasons where we can and can't have designated campaign areas. But again, when we release that list, there will be some voting centres that do. But just noting that the idea is that they're not in that main thoroughfare. You're not getting to talk to every voter as they come past. It's really a spot a little way off where people who really want to find out more can then go and seek you out. So you're allowed up to 3 people in those areas, including yourself as a candidate. And there are forms to nominate people there. So it's waiting for this list to come out to see, which ones in your area do. And then weighing up, I think in previous elections, some people have really loved them, and others have found they'd rather just be at the 100-meter boundary. So it's having a look at the ones that are available for you. Going into financial disclosure, there's three main things to really remember. One is this territory campaign account, so the bank account that everything's going in and out of. One is that you've got to keep a record of all gifts and provide returns and disclosure. And then the third one is expenditure. So you've got to keep a track of expenditure and remain within the expenditure cap. So in terms of the territory campaign account, you need a bank account for which you're bringing gifts in and you're putting all your election spending out of. This can be an account you create within your personal banking. You can go to a different bank, create a whole new account, but you just need to have it so that, yeah, we're keeping a record of everything coming in and going out. After the election, we do engage an auditor who will go through a selection of candidates just to verify the returns provided, because they are self-reported returns. So it's really important that you put everything through this account. And also, if you receive your nomination deposit back, so if you get a certain number of votes, you'll actually get that $500 nomination deposit back, can go into that account. So please keep it open after the election. I know we have independent candidates in the room, but for endorsed candidates as well, this is what's really important, to push everything through your party, because there is that one account for the party. In terms of gifts, so you have to keep a record of all gifts, monetary and non-monetary. Things like non-monetary, if somebody's giving you, say, a whole bunch of corflutes for free. In terms of volunteers, we're looking more at people who are helping you in a professional capacity around reaching the public. So the example, probably the best example is, a graphic designer. If a graphic designer does a whole lot of free work for you, they're qualified, that's their job. But otherwise, we don't care about your door knockers. We don't care about any of that. That's just that specific bit we're looking for in terms of gifts. There are two sort of contrasting rules, which are a little bit tricky in terms of you can accept anonymous donations up to $200 if you're an independent, and a bit more if you're an endorsed. But you also need to provide the details of anyone that gives you $200 or more over the election cycle. So it gets a little bit tricky there in terms of, you can take anonymous donations, but need to provide those details if they cumulatively get above a certain amount. Noting the difficulty of this, we've set up, and again in our documentation, a couple of rules around, things like your small fundraisers, where you're getting $5, $10 from people here and there. Some rules to make that more practical. I know some people are doing crowdsourcing. So in terms of that, we've kind of set out, there are a bunch of websites where you automatically will get the full details. So it's, if you are crowdsourcing, those rules don't change. And we've noticed some will make it a lot easier for you than others. But it is something to note. There are gift returns, one of which is due today. As a candidate, once you've sort of publicly announced and you've started campaigning, you need to provide these gift returns. It's an Excel spreadsheet. More than happy to answer any questions and work through it with you. Any endorsed candidates with a party will just need to provide through their party. In terms of electoral expenditure, so again, in our documentation, we've set it out quite broad. A lot of it is around that reaching the public. So it's creating advertising, producing it, distributing it, a couple of other things. If you're paying a campaign manager, paying a graphic designer, whatever else. So it's really kind of have a look through. Again, happy to answer any questions. There are a couple of things that are specifically excluded. So travel and accommodation, food and drink, professional services like accountant, lawyer, whatever else. But again, if in doubt, ask. We're always happy to answer those sort of questions. With expenditure, there is a cap, so it's 45,600 for independents, and for parties, it's that amount for every seat they're running in. So it's up to 1.14 million if they run candidates in all seats. With expenditure, there's one return right at the end. So it's due October. So with gift returns, there's quite a few periodic ones. So there's one now, there's one early August. In particular, in August, there's a couple that are due in quite short succession. And with those ones, we're actually legislated that we have to put up the answers within a certain amount of time. So particularly there, we're going to be putting them up on our website very quickly. The electoral expenditure, that goes up right at the end. Other than that, there are specific rules if you're taking out, say, a loan to finance your campaign. Again, we've sort of documented, more than happy to answer questions on that. If any donor provides $1,500 or more of value in a financial year, they need to submit a donor return. So if you're thinking at the moment, anyone who in the last financial year gave you that amount, they need to submit that return. We've got the form on our website. Again, happy to provide that to you, but it's important to note. And as a candidate, you actually need to tell them within, I believe it's a month of the end of the financial year. And where you have to keep your records for at least 4 years, but noting a lot of them, tax office is still 5 years. It doesn't change any of that. So I believe we're up to questions now, and questions for any of the speakers. I know Jordan at the start said, I think online we don't have that capacity to take questions that way. So if you want to email or call, but yeah, otherwise questions from the room. Yeah.
Curious about why we can get a $200 donation when the candidates and parties can get over $1,500.
Without disclosing the details.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be honest,
Pretty weird.
I don't actually know the why that was put in the legislation. But
Do you know when that law was made?
so that was brought in just before the 2020 election.
Right.
But yeah, other than
I think we have the answer.
So I understand.
yeah.
Just on page 33 of the under section 278 of the election act, it's a definition of nominee. Section 278 of the election act. Page 33. We can sort of clear out the definition. I can send that in an email. So I can get that. It's campaign materials 278. I'm sorry. I said the details are pressing. Yeah. Certainly happy to respond and even share a response to that one if that's okay. Thank you. Yeah. I just think that people know on election. So I guess that one people as a savings provision. So if somebody is new to the territory or involved in the state, So there's anything correct.
So if anyone is new to the territory or if they're interstate, they have the ability to come to a voting centre and declare that they are new to the territory and that they haven't voted in this election before. They can complete a declaration envelope, which also doubles as an enrolment form. What will happen after the close of the elections for voting, all those declarations will be checked for eligibility. So we will do the checks to see that they're not enrolled in the territory somewhere and that they are eligible to be enrolled. That will go to the AEC. They'll do their checks. If they deem them eligible, what will come back is that they will enrol them and put them onto the electoral roll for the selection, and we will accept their vote.
So that's for any, not something that is new to the, you'll just like be enrolled.
Exactly. So it's somebody who is not on the electoral roll as of the close of the roll. So if they're from a different division and for some reason they've moved house, but they haven't updated their enrolment within the allocated time frame and they want a vote for their other division, we have to give them a vote for the division that they're enrolled in as of that date. So no, they need proof of identity for their form, but it can be in the, like if you know your license number, you can write that on there. They do need like a proof of identity, but they don't have to show that identity to us. They just need to complete it on their form.
So for people who understand this about
all right, so what happened is that the legislation has changed and they are now able to provide a Medicare number as identity. And most people will have a Medicare number. There is also an Australian citizenship number that they can provide now as well.
Sorry,
Yeah,
it's asked on the
they just need to have the number. So if they have the number on their phone or with them, that's fine. But they just do need to put that either a license number, a passport number, citizenship number, or a Medicare number on the phone so that we can enrol them. So it's still an enrolment requirement to be able to be assessed for that eligibility.
Could I just clarify that? My understanding was that you said that if they are new to the territory or say
Yep.
they have to go to the voting centre,
Yep.
complete the declaration, which doubles as an enrolment
Yep.
form,
Yep.
and if deemed eligible, the vote will be accepted. So presumably there's a voting form contains alongside
So they'll be
the enrolment form.
So basically, the envelope is twofold. So it will be a declaration to say that they can vote in the election. They believe they can vote. We will issue them a vote on the day for their division that they're claiming their enrolled address to be, and then that will go into that declaration. So the enrolment form will go on to the AEC. They will assess their eligibility to be enrolled. If they deem that is fine, that will come back to us, and then we will treat that as a vote to be accepted. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that does. You also mentioned though that if they were enrolled elsewhere in the territory, then they had that enrolment on that day as well, they had to take it.
Yes.
Desire for a new election.
No, they have to update their details prior to the close of roll to be eligible to be a new division or a new address.
Thanks.
Just going off Justine's question, you said 278.
Yeah.
That's a publication of statements regarding candidates. So a person must not publish or authorize to be published on behalf of an entity statement. You love that job to put it.
Okay.
Is that the right?
I was quickly writing down because I don't think there's no way Wi-Fi uses. But anyway, we'll find out why I needed it. Can I just ask about the Darwin Entertainment Centre? Are we able to set the 10, can we 10 to 10 metres?
We are still seeking clarification on the 10 metres. So the 10 metre zone will be set by the voting centre manager as the entrance to the voting centre for early voting. If the Darwin Entertainment Centre deem that there is no campaigning during the early voting period, their land outside that will be a no campaign area. So that is for their determination to say that they don't want campaigning. On election day, it's 100 metres regardless. So there is no 10 metre boundary on election day voting centres. So the commissioner will deem the 100-metre boundary, which will be an area that encompasses probably any car parks or anything else. So we're still getting clarification from the owners, Darwin Entertainment Centre, on what they're going to allow during the early voting process. That's, I think, one of the ones that we are still waiting on. So
Just a few questions. So the income applicators, so that is available digitally.
Yeah, it's online. Yeah.
How does it on the website?
This is what's
Okay. Okay. I've given old gifts of old golf clues. Do I have to account for that?
As in that you've used in previous
Yeah.
elections.
It's old golf clues. The second answer version. Do I have to account for that?
I think it's so in general, we're going if it's been claimed in, say, a previous election. We're not asking people to claim again. Probably better to sit down and sort of really talk through exactly what you're getting there. But yeah, that's our general rules. We're not making people claim twice what they're doing.
Yeah, I gave a chance to do. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, last question really was, can we see the gifts that the Labour and Liberal parties are getting online?
Yeah, so that's on the website.
That's all available, and all their financing will be available.
Yeah, so all the
If it's not able to $3,000.
so on the website will be the total amount, total number of donors, and then for parties, the details of everyone that's given 1,500 or more, and for independents, the $200 or more. So at the moment, that's up for the last one that was due in end of March, and the one that's due today, that will be up on the website within a couple of days, and that's parties and independents.
And it's actually in the political party.
As in, so that they have to do gift returns in the same way independents do. So if someone's giving 100 grand to one of the parties, that goes in that return, the one that's due today, and will be up on the web in a couple of days.
some sort of mind.
Okay, I'm gonna have to mind this website.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so parties have to put everything they're getting in. The only exception is if they're getting something specifically for a federal election, or for example here the referendum. So any money they got for the referendum last year, that doesn't have to go up. But yeah, parties have to put all money they're coming in. Candidates, it's really around the money you're getting for your campaign. Yep.
Does that include the one bank account that has been nominated by the party as being for electoral purposes? I mean, if they have multiple bank accounts, how does that work?
So, like we do talk with parties around this. They tend to have they do have to have an election account. They have other, operational federal accounts. We have to work with them because it's obviously a little bit of a different banking structure. But any money coming in needs to be declared, and we get to see all those after the election.
All of it.
Yeah.
I was asking now about section 268. Was that a publication statements regarding candidates? And they've got, they say, vote youth, vote green, there was all this false advertising. And the candidates I'm seeing false advertising about me, the vote for others, vote for Labour. Is that well, it's all on social media?
That would be like misinformation.
Yes, misinformation. So it's actually being circulated by certain.
Yeah, let's send that through. Work through that.
That was my question. Equity, do you have expertise on this?
Yeah, it's a bit like we obviously have to work with, if we know who's putting it out, ideally we can work with them quickly. We can work with the platforms. That can take a little bit longer. But we do have a number of acts, and there are a number of offences in the legislation. So we do have powers within there.
I thought you were allowed to lie.
So you're allowed to lie In terms of, so you could write, you could lie in terms of, I've been member for the last 5 years and I've built 25 hospitals in Darwin. You could put up that. What you can't lie about is how the electoral process works. So it's, yeah.
That's an interesting code. So you are campaigning, and there is information out there that you know to be incorrect, but you call it out yourself on your platforms as well. And please, we are responsible for the authorisation and the correct authorisation of campaign material, and there is a line between truth and political advertising and incorrect electoral information. So we're happy to see all of that and provide some feedback on that. But we'd certainly say if you do see something and you are a candidate and it is inconsistent with the messages that you're putting forward, that you call that out so that electors who might be following you have that information available to them to correct that on the record coming from the source that it relates to. So I would certainly encourage that, but please let us know and we can look into those things as well within the authority that we have under the Electoral Act. So.
Trouble you with enlarging that. Just can't read the straight.
So yeah, we can talk about
Thanks.
One is do events, and so food events and stuff like that. What about something prior venues?
Yeah, running a campaign event, hiring that venue, that's
And also, you can find, so whether you have any insight to look at how independents might do their openings, whether you had any insights from the past about what was most likely to go forward.
I think it's, we noticed so in particular that there was an issue where people started to put the just one in their box and all the other boxes empty, and that caused important like this just across Australia.
Yeah.
So that's something we're really mindful of making those very clear instructions. I guess it's otherwise putting it in all the, numbering all the boxes, I guess tends to be over the past, seeing how things have been done. But I know a number of independents now want to really show, no loyalty to either party. And so we're seeing that more, and that's fine with those instructions.
And if you see some people on the state something like you was like giving you lots of something, person up which everybody I just want to really see you that.
I don't think we've come across it here. That real clear message of you need to number in every box. There are some formality things, what we can accept is we can see the voter's intention in terms of ticks and, missing that last number. But that's not really something to put in those cards. It kind of helps someone that might be struggling to vote and help us try to get their vote in the count. But having that very clear, you've got to number every box. And that's when they're given the ballot paper, that's the instruction we give them as well.
So, yes, that is. And I think you are great, and there's not voting centres in both
Yes, so we do have open voting in hospitals and prison this election, but for the aged care, like we said there, we are working with them to do a lot more work on the postal voting because they are longer term residents than instead of someone that's been there for a short term. And just when I'm looking about the declaration votes too, and you are more than welcome to provide scrutineers to watch us sort of assess a declaration vote to whether it is accepted and rejected as well. So you are able to scrutinise our processes for the declaration votes as well.
And so I'll just close the information session for today. We'll be available. We're not going anywhere. I'm just closing it for the online participants. So if you have any questions online, please email us at ntec.nt.gov.au or give us a call, and we're happy to have a chat. And we'll talk to you all after the event. Thank you.